All right, we're going to go ahead and get started. First things first, I want to thank everybody for attending the webinar, Should You Be on Flat Rate Pricing, with our industry expert, Jeremy Lowe. A few housekeeping notes here before I introduce our speaker. First things first, this webinar will be recorded. So if for some reason there's some information that you missed during the webinar, things are moving a little bit too fast, no worries. We will make sure to send out this webinar to all registrants and attendees. So don't worry if you missed something, we will make sure to get that recording out to everybody. Also, if everybody could locate at the very bottom of your screen, you should see a chat and a Q&A section. So one thing that I do encourage everyone to do is during the webinar, definitely throw out some questions and answers, some comments. We'd love to answer any questions that you have, provided there's time live on this webinar. So I definitely want to see those questions and answers throughout the webinar. And again, if there's something you want to chat with us privately about, there's that chat feature as well. So now I'd like to introduce our speaker, Jeremy Lowe. Jeremy has been in the industry for 40 plus years. I think it's much longer than that, but he doesn't look old enough to do so. Jeremy has a ton of knowledge. This is one of my favorite webinars, just for the simple fact that I think there's a lot of expertise that Jeremy provides specifically in this area. But Jeremy's been doing this for 40 plus years, started out as an installer's helper, has been able to work himself up to a GM of a $14 million contracting firm. And 20 years ago, Jeremy started in the industry as a consultant, a profit coach, and a trainer. Jeremy's also a published writer, a trade show speaker, has trained thousands of contractors, and now we're lucky to have him as the VP of Flat Rate Content and Training here at Profit Rhino, powered by Callahan Roach. This is such a great topic. Jeremy's going to provide a lot of information, so please get some questions and answers in while the webinar is going on. And with no further ado, I will introduce Jeremy Lowe. Jeremy, you can take it away.
Well, thanks, Jeff. I told Jeff to introduce me with a little bit of a joke. So what does he say? He says, I'm not old enough to be in this industry this long. Thanks, Jeff. Today, we're going to talk about flat rate pricing. And what's really sad about our industry is 25 to 30% of businesses that do service work in homes go out of business every year. Now, why is that? Why do we see out after 10 years, only about 29% of companies still have their doors open in the service world? And I'm not just talking air conditioning, electric, plumbing. I'm talking all in-home service trades. Why is there that problem? Well, certainly not because there's not enough business out there. We know there's plenty of business. Businesses fail in these industries for one thing: they don't have cash. You see, there's a difference between having business and having cash. Cash is what pays the bills. Business is what generates that cash. So if we don't have enough cash by the time we pay all of our internal bills, we're going to have a problem with our business. Now, some businesses stay open, but yet the industry average for our industries, heating, air conditioning, electrical, and plumbing, we average single-digit net profits. So if you run $1 million company and you make, let's say 6%, $60,000, well, that's not a huge payback for the amount of effort it takes to run an organization of that size. Why is it? Where does the problem lay with not having enough cash and having such low profits? Primarily, it can be tied to one thing: not charging correctly for the work that we do. Now, we're not going to be talking about replacement work or construction bids. We're going to talk strictly about service work. Now, what's amazed me is out of the last 6 to 8 months, I've been talking to contractors, and I am absolutely blown away by the fact that many contractors have not raised their rates in the last 6 months. Keeping our rates the same is damaging to us and our businesses. Now, we have normal inflation, but think about what's happened over the last 2 years due to COVID. And yet some contractors tell me, well, I'm already high enough. Well, if you're high enough and parts went up on average over 6.5% this year alone, and you're on a fixed rate pricing structure, well, you're suffering. And so we have to be able to pass this on to the customer. And normally we would strictly raise our hourly rate. The old way that we've always done business in this industry is when a customer calls us, it usually starts off with a question of, what do you charge? How much is it going to take to get you to my house? What's your hourly rate? or something of that nature. Or maybe we have a customer that thinks they know what the problem is. Well, I have a leaking faucet and it's a Delta. What's it going to take to fix it? Or my neighbor tells me my condenser motor's bad. What's a 1/3 condenser motor going to cost me? And so we fall into the trap of quoting these prices over the phone or telling them how much our hourly rate is. And unless we spend a lot of time explaining ourselves and trying to get that customer to want to do business with us, especially a new customer, the phone call usually ends with, well, let me think about it or I'll get back to you later. And this is part of the problem of presenting our prices to consumers based on an hourly rate. We're telling them what we charge. And because consumers don't understand what it takes to run a business as expensive as our service industry is, we have to do a lot of justification. And since we've given them a price, we in fact encourage them to rate shop. It's kind of like giving them a price on a dozen eggs. Well, I'm just going to look and find where I can get the dozen cheaper. And there's ambiguity when we tell somebody we're going to charge them by the hour. We may estimate how long it's going to take, but in their mind, that's not a fixed contract. And so as a result, the customer focuses not just on the rate you're charging, but on how long it's going to take you so that in their mind, they can calculate out this end price. When I first looked at flat rate back in 1992 in a company I was a service manager in, the gentleman who explained it to us said, we're presenting our prices, time and material is kind of like a Texas two-step. Today it would be, well, it's $110 for the first half hour and $27.50 a quarter hour thereafter. Or we have a minimum $150 charge for an hour, and then it's so much per half hour after that. And what we're trying to do is get that initial price we quote as low as possible so that we don't get sticker shock out of the customer. Here's the problem. Consumers today don't make, in general, $100, $110 an hour. And in some market areas where we have to be $150 to $200 an hour because of cost of operation, it's hard for a consumer who simply sees someone in a truck equate in their own mind that they're making more than possibly even their doctor makes. And so there's where that price shopping comes in. I can't believe that you're making this. They don't understand. We're not making that. We're making a 3 to 6% net profit. So when you talk about a time and material service call, here's the pitfalls. Customers want the lowest rate. Now they want the lowest rate, whether it's flat rate or not. I'll admit that. But when you give them the opportunity to shop, then it becomes strictly about the rate. How many times when you were running service, if you were, and you told the customer you think something would take you an hour, hour and a half, it takes you an hour and a half, and you go back in, start to fill the invoice out, and the customer says, well, wait a minute, you said an hour. They have selective hearing. They drop that half hour. So we either end up arguing with them or eating it or splitting it. Any way you look at it, it's not good for us. One of the things I absolutely detest is having to pay baggage fees when I fly. People hate fees. They hate being nickel and dimed. They hate environmental fees. These type of things really upset consumers. So if we have to take our hourly rate and keep it low, and then we pad it with a bunch of extra fees, that's another turnoff for consumers. But the biggest problem is we make the customer our own enemy for service techs by making them watch their watch instead of watching the skill of our employees. Let's look at it a different way. Let's look at time and material and apply it to things that aren't time and material right now. And I want to start with going to a fine dining establishment. You know, the one where they bring the steak out on the plate to show you the cuts of meat. Well, what would happen if you were there with your significant other and they show you the steak and nice porterhouse? Well, it's $27 for this porterhouse, but it's 3 minutes. It's $3 for each minute on the grill. And so you like your steak almost mooing, and your significant other likes theirs really well done. Would it make sense to you that they would pay perhaps $12 or $16 more because it takes more time on the grill than yours? That's absurd. When have you ever seen a restaurant charge by the amount of time it takes to cook a meal? Some meals take longer. Restaurants present what's called a menu price. In other words, you look at it, and if you want to pay market price for the lobster, the surf and turf, great. If you want to get chicken, great. But you know the price up front and you know exactly what you're getting. What about a movie? Now, nationally, the average movie runs about an hour and 3/4. So if you take and look at the average US ticket price, and this includes matinees, it's about $10. So Toy Story, which was only an hour and 20-minute movie, if we charge by the hour, it would be $8.26. Now, if we looked at Titanic or Ben-Hur or the Ten Commandments, those long movies, we'd charge $21.78 for that movie. Well, you know, I'm going to justify this. I'm a manager of a theater. I have to run the air more. I have to keep people at the concession stand longer. I have to pay for more electric. No, you're never going to find a theater charging this way. It's just, here's my marquee price. Here's the matinee price. Pick what you want. Let's go to the reduction of the ridiculous. You ever see a 10-minute oil change? Guaranteed 10 minutes or less. When Jiffy Lube started their franchise 30 some years ago, this was actually on their signs, if you remember. And then they took it down. Now, today, Jiffy Lube and some of these other places, without a coupon, of course, they get anywhere from $29 up, depending on the market, for just a standard oil change, not synthetic, anything like that. How would you feel if you came home and asked your significant other about the oil change they got in the car that day? Well, what did it cost? And they say, let's see, $120 an hour plus parts. What would you say? That's ridiculous. But you know what? That is exactly what they are charging. Let me show you the math. And I know this because I have a very close friend that owns a Jiffy Lube franchise. And he told me that he buys oil and material in enough bulk that if he doesn't use a brand name filter, he can sell it at $10 and still make about a 25% markup. So that leaves another $20. Actually, if you throw an environmental fee, because they always put those on there, $22.95. But for math, we're just going to say $20. 10 minutes or less, remember? So if we do the math, if they can do 6 oil changes an hour, that's $120 an hour. They are effectively charging us for that 10 minutes to do an oil change. But we don't think about it that way because we are presented an upfront price. Now, really, there are different people in your business, and your business loses if you are stuck in the time and material mentality. The dispatcher, the technician, the customer, and your company all suffer when you gamble by giving prices by the hour. Let's talk about the dispatcher. Is it fair that the dispatcher has to deal with rate shoppers, that they have to spend time justifying the rate when the phone is ringing and we end up losing calls because of that? Or the customer pushes you to give a price, you give a price, you get out there, and you find out something else is wrong, and all of a sudden the customer gets mad because you gave them the price and now you want to change it. Or the customer calls up complaining that the tech didn't work fast enough. And don't laugh, maybe you've heard this one. A customer called me one day and said, am I going to pay for that guy standing out behind the truck smoking a cigarette for 10 minutes? You can't tell me that customer wasn't watching the clock. That's exactly what they're doing. And when the office has to deal with complaints about pricing, it interrupts productivity, which drops profitability. Is it fair to the technician if perchance he's more experienced, and because he's more experienced, he gets more calls? In other words, we work him harder simply because he's more experienced. Well, you might say that's what they sign up for. But on the other side, if he's not well experienced, he's a junior tech learning his trade, is it fair that he gets yelled at because it takes him longer to do something if he's charging by the hour? Of course not. Is it fair when customers rush technicians and they create a callback because they're being rushed? Now, we don't want callbacks. We continually harp on that with our technicians. But yet, if a customer is pushing so that they're paying the least amount of money, we're going to get callbacks. If the tech is working fast, typically quality suffers. What's that old adage? You can have it fast, you can have it good, or you can have it cheap, but you can't have all three. And we know that when we rush any employee, the quality of the work will suffer. Now, is it also fair to technicians that we say to them, listen, we're going to give you a way to earn more money. You can sell service agreements, you can sell this air purifier, whatever, and then we're rushing them to get to the next call because it's all dependent on them billing more hours. We basically dangle a carrot and then take it away from them. Is it fair to the customer if the tech we're sending out is a junior tech, perhaps doesn't have the tools or the right training and takes longer? I had a customer one time call me and tell me they wanted a specific tech to do all of their jobs. They were a commercial account. And I asked them why, and they said, because he's the fastest tech you have. And that kind of clicked with me. Is customers get that. They know that the faster the tech, the more money they save. What if the tech had a good party last night? Or maybe he's got a newborn and didn't get any sleep, or perhaps just doesn't feel good. And so he's slower than normal. Is that really fair to the customer? Here's one that used to frustrate me to no end. We did a lot of new construction work. So we did a lot of subdivisions where the house was the exact same model, bang, 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 same size air conditioner. And yet we go out and change two condenser motors side by side in the course of a couple months and end up with two totally different prices because one tech took longer than the other tech. You ever been on the end of that phone call from a customer? It's not a pleasant one. But we create that problem because of the way we bill. Really, is it fair the customers pay for things that they can't control, the things that we have just discussed? And is it fair because they feel that to rush the customer will get them the best price, that they then in turn have to suffer the problem of a callback? No, you have to agree with me. None of that is fair, but it's just the way we've always done it. We've been doing time and material since World War II. But guess what? It's not fair to your organization because you will not and cannot make the profit margins you need to grow and expand because of a simple backward equation. You see, you go out and you hire someone, and we oftentimes try to hire technicians that we can train to do things our way. And face it, our industry does not have a glut of experienced techs just running around. So sometimes we have to build and mold our own. So we hire one, and they don't cost us as much money as a senior tech. So we invest in training. That's expensive. And as we train, they get better, hopefully. And as they get better, they get faster, right? So as they get faster, we give them more work. And guess what? They make us less money. Now, this is where people usually go, whoa, wait a minute, that's not true. Yes, it is. Assume the average travel time in this scenario is a half hour. So we take our senior tech that really can work quickly, and he can do 6 calls a day. Well, guess what? 3 hours of that is travel. So he's effectively billing 5 hours. However, our junior tech, who can only do 4 calls a day, he's at the house longer, he's billing 6 hours. Carry that out over a year, that's 250 additional hours. And if we were only charging $100 an hour, that tech generates $12,500 additional dollars for us than the more experienced tech, as long as their sales abilities are the same. So you see, speed is not where it is at. That's why many years ago in 1988, a contractor in the Carolinas by the name of Jim Kimmons realized these problems, and he wanted to come up with a way to simplify presenting a price to a consumer. So he turned to the automotive industry, and he noticed that the automotive industry did what was called flat rate or book pricing. He went in to get his brakes changed. They flipped open a book. There were the parts. Here is the price. This is what we call flat rate. Now, a lot of times contractors at this point say, well, that's not what customers want. Customers want to know how it breaks down. Customers want to know how it breaks down because we've trained them to do that. A few years ago, 11,000 homeowners who had recently had service work done in their house were surveyed. And the question, I'm going to paraphrase it, was this: if you could have your service work done where you charged by the hour and possibly not know exactly how much it would cost, or have an upfront price and possibly pay a little more, but you would know exactly what the price is before you start, which would you rather have? 91% said they wanted an upfront price, even if they had to pay a little more, because at least they knew exactly what it was going to cost. But here's what's disappointing. Only 44% of those 11,000 customers says they were serviced that way. Now, what do you see here? You see consumers that want something a certain way, and yet we stubbornly, in some cases, do it the way we just have always done it. A flat rate is not complicated. It's just simply coming up with a price and giving the consumer a lump upfront price without breaking out parts, without breaking out labor cost. It doesn't take advantage of anyone. It allows the tech to have a specific period of time to do a job, gives them enough time to do it professionally and thoroughly. Right now, flat rates everywhere. We talked about movies, we talked about food. I fly into major metropolitan airports all the time, and yes, taxis charge by the mile, but most major airports, the taxis will have a little sign in the window that says downtown flat rate. They actually use the word flat rate. Attorneys even, divorce, flat rate, bankruptcy, flat rate. It doesn't apply in all cases, but the point is they understand the value of taking the focus off of that hourly rate. So here's how we handled in my company back in the early 90s an incoming phone call where a customer said, how much? We simply said, well, we don't charge by the hour. We charge by the job that we do. Our tech will come to your house for a fee of $89, not saying that's the right number, just using it. And he will thoroughly evaluate your system. In other words, he's not looking for just what's broke. He's also looking for what might have contributed to it breaking. Nothing worse than me fixing something and it breaking again, right? He'll then give you a written proposal for the work that he's found, and you'll have the opportunity to accept or decline, but you'll know the price up front. It was a simple explanation. Now, the customer at this point, they were completely in control. They knew that they didn't give us carte blanche. We were going to tell them exactly what it was going to cost to the penny. There was no surprises at the end. But even more importantly, what the customer liked is when we were able to say to them when they said, well, how do you figure these prices out? You say, well, we use a professional company and it's based on the national average of the complexity of the job and the national average cost of parts. And so we really don't know how it's all calculated out. It's the average price. So we're not the highest, we're not the lowest. And customers, believe me when I tell you this, they respect that. They don't like to think that they're the cheapest person. So when you say your average price, A lot of them go, oh, okay, because they don't want to appear cheap. But this is independent. And you can do that if you have it done by a third party. Now the tech is not being hounded by a clock watcher. The tech doesn't have to do a bunch of math in the truck. The tech doesn't get blamed for the price. Opens a book or shows them in an app, wherever it's presented. Here's the price, bang. When you put something in black and white, it has a little more authority. If the tech spends an hour and a half doing a job, the flat rate will have that covered. So we're not giving away time anymore because the customer only heard the hour. And of course, we get rid of that problem of one tech charge one thing for the exact same motor next to his neighbor. In turn, as we use this and customers pick up on it, it does bring us more business. Consumers like transparency. We don't have to bid our labor against our competitors. We can charge the rates that we need to, and of course, that lends to better profitability. And believe it or not, flat rate actually helps reduce the workload we do in the office when it comes to the inputting of billing, which also increases profitability. So if you really want to have an impact on your business and take that focus off of what you're charging an hour, and instead push the customer to focus on your company, your brand, your professionalism, and you want to improve your profit and grow your company and provide better things for your employees, then flat rate is the way to do it. Now, Callahan Roach purchased the flat rate product from Jim Kimmons in 1988 and started taking it across the country in educational classes. And today, it is considered hands down the most comprehensive and most up-to-date database in existence. We've had phone calls from the US government. We've had phone calls from NASA. We've done business with major OEM warranties, major home warranty companies, looking for what's called usual and customary charges. So our data is empirically proven. We collected for thousands and thousands of invoices over the years, looking at various techs. We know exactly how long it takes to do something. And then we have some algorithms we apply so that we're not basing it on an average tech. We're actually basing time on a less than average tech. I'll give you an illustration. I mean, almost any of us can change a capacitor in 15 minutes, right? We use a half hour. Now, we've got a little fudge factor in almost every repair because you've got to go to the truck, you've got to get it out. It's not the physical act of changing the capacitor. And so now if you have a tech that actually does change it in a half hour or changes a motor in a half hour where we have an hour, that tech can be at another call billing, and you are still collecting money from the previous call based on what you billed for. So it's very equitable across the board. And in 2012, Profit Rhino developed a digital product that allows you to present flat rate as options, allows you to upsell and cross-sell different things. And believe me, when I tell you, you can take service tickets and quadruple the average service ticket revenue simply by letting the customer have choices of what they want and seeing that the majority of them gravitate towards something more than just the cheapest price. And today we've merged Callahan Roach and Profit Rhino, and we can present flat rate either in a digital product that works on a phone, a tablet, with or without an invoicing system, or even if you're pen and paper, we can present it in a book format. But you know, I have heard probably in my career every reason why flat rate doesn't work. And over the years, a gentleman by the name of Matt Michelle from Service Roundtable collected some of these myths that Callahan Roach has been talking about and put them in a book. So I'm going to hit on them very briefly. If you want to drill down into them, you can contact us, or I encourage you to look up this book. We don't get anything out of this, but it's a great book on how to raise your rates and how to use flat rate. Well, it takes advantage of customers. We call that the gouging myth. Listen, if you have a contractor in your area that wants to charge $400 or $500 for a 5 microfarad capacitor, and somebody's willing to pay it, bless it. But it's not the problem of the flat rate. It's the contractor. You see, flat rate companies don't set the rate. The contractor sets the hourly rate and the parts markup. All we do is say, this is how long on average the repair takes. This is the national average of part prices. You can't blame the tool for the workman not being able to use it correctly. Flat rate's not going to make a dishonest contractor honest any more than it'll make an honest contractor suddenly dishonest. So these exorbitant price flat rate contractors that are out there, it's not the problem of flat rate. It's the problem of what they want to charge. And that's up to them, right? We don't control that. Well, my technicians won't like it. Yeah, my response to that's real simple. Who runs the show? You or your technicians? Yes, I realize technicians are hard to get. But here, if we sit down and we explain to them clearly how flat rate is better for them, how flat rate is better for the customer, and how flat rate will allow us to raise profits to provide better things for our employees, I've seen very few technicians out over the probably 5,000 that I've trained in my career that aren't willing to adopt the flat rate. And ironically, the ones that complain the loudest when we start end up being the biggest advocates, because what they love about it is the customer can't blame them anymore for the price. They show the customer the price. Here it is in black and in white. Another myth. Well, it doesn't have everything I do, or it doesn't have all the parts. You know, if we waited for Bill Gates to make Windows perfect, we'd still be on DOS, right? It's not perfection we're looking for, it's progress. We have about 95% of every possible scenario covered that you could imagine. We will never have a perfect product, but we do have in our digital application a little button up at the top that allows you to feed back to my content team. We have a full-time team here in Arlington, Texas, that works on this database. And you tell us about issues and we can respond, and we push out quarterly updates on the digital product. And so you are assured that we are keeping up not only with what the industry feeds us, but even what you find. And we can show you how you can hand calculate something if you must do it immediately in the field. Now, after you get flat rate, you will find that parts costs are higher than what you pay at the counter. That's by design. We're using national part pricing, and I hope to goodness you're paying less than that. And that should just go in your pocket. It helps cover the bouncing prices. You know, this last year, we had one manufacturer go up four times, and their first jump was 7.5%. So if part prices are slightly higher, and they're not going to cover a 20% jump, but if they're slightly higher, you do have a little flexibility as part prices go up between those quarterly updates. And really, the price of the parts is not the issue. The price of the labor is not the issue. What the issue is the customer's perception of the value of what you're doing for what you're charging. If you're doing a good job, you're thoroughly professional, all you need to concentrate on is not what the parts cost, but rather what the customer is willing to pay. Well, what about this job I go out and I've got a low voltage short? I don't know how long it'll take. It could take me hours to find it. I can't do that for $89 diagnostic or whatever you're charging. I'm not asking you to. You know, in our business, we have a lot of things that go south. Warranties, calls, change outs. We've had change outs that sometimes we haven't made anywhere near the money we thought we'd make. The callbacks always cost us money. But the way flat rate is built is you diagnose or evaluate. You thoroughly look at the system, and a lot of times you'll find more than one thing wrong. So if you go out and the problem is it has a low voltage short, guess what? That's the end of your diagnostic. You just diagnosed the problem. It has a low voltage short. Now, tracing it, that's a chargeable task. Just like finding a leak is a chargeable task, the diagnostic is not, it's low on refrigerant, you have a leak, I have to find it. The diagnostic is, it's low on refrigerant. Now we're going to have a task for whatever we have to do. 95% of the time, this is going to work in your favor. You are going to come out ahead on labor, and you are going to come out ahead on parts. But for the few times you don't, the offsetting number that came out in your favor far make up for it, because labor is padded and parts are slightly higher. You know, we tend to remember the one bad job rather than the 50 that really went good, don't we? I can't charge that. I can't charge what you're telling me I need to charge. Well, first, I'm not telling you what to charge. You need to charge what you have to make the profit you want in your service department. But when I do classes, I will ask owners in classes, how many of you think that right now you could go up by $1 an hour right now? You could call the office and go up. And rarely have I not had every hand in the room go up. And so you know what my next question is? Then why haven't you? You're telling me you can do it, but yet you're not charging it. $1 an hour adds up real quick if you got 3 or 4 techs and they're billing 1,000 hours a year. The problem typically with contractors going up is never the customer. It's the technician resistance and it's the owner's resistance between their own 2 ears. Don't feel bad. I had the same problem. I had a great fear to go from $38 to $50 back in the early 90s, but I had to because my service department was losing money. Once I realized that I had to quit thinking that the price was too high and let the customer tell me when my prices became too high, I really began to earn a profit. Charge what you must. So here we are. Let me illustrate this. If this was our calculation for the part, this is what we were going to sell a part for, and we were going to charge $125 for an hour of labor. That totals $358 rounded off. If the customer didn't know what I was going to charge, didn't know it was $358, and instead I said $363, would I lose the job? What if I said $368, $10 more? Would I lose the job? If I lose a $350 job over $10, there's a bigger problem than my pricing, wouldn't you agree? In fact, at $393, the customer may not even have an issue. This is what we talk about price perception. It's minuscule when you raise your rates in small increments. Now, if you go up $200, like some contractors have done in flat rate, well, then it's a little bit different, obviously. So if we take a condenser motor with an hour of labor and we go up $10 an hour, it changes the price by 10 bucks, a contactor by $5. So you see, this is small incremental increases that consumers don't notice. Whereas if you go from 100 to 110 or 150 to $160 an hour, that sticks out like a sore thumb in front of a consumer. Well, I tried it before and it didn't work. I hear that one a lot too. You know, when I first tried to work with a hammer and a nail, I remember banging my thumb. I was probably about 8 years old and I screamed and hooted and hollered. My dad said, after I had hurled the hammer across the yard, he said, never blame the tool. It's always the workman who doesn't know how to use it. Flat rate's going to take tweaking. No flat rate product will work 100% out of the box without a little adjustment. But if you're willing to work with someone professional like us to help you make those adjustments, flat rate works in every company. So I can build it myself. Yeah, and if I gave you a hammer, nails, and wood, you could probably build your own ladder, but why would you? I just paid $119 a couple nights ago for a 6-foot Warner 300-pound rated ladder. Why in the world would I build one? I have other things to do. For you to keep up with parts the way my staff does here in Dallas, Fort Worth, you would have to have 2 or 3 people in your company. Well, if you can't do that, you're not keeping up. You're just kind of keeping up. Well, it costs too much money. No, Flat rate is the only thing in your business that will actually not only pay for itself, but make you money. If you had 4 techs or 5 techs, excuse me, billing only 4 calls a day, that's 20 hours a week, and you went up $1, the $1 that everybody says they can go up, you would make an additional $433 a month. And it cost a lot less than $433 a month to have 5 techs using flat rate. If you went up $10, you would be generating an additional $4,000+ a month. At that point, you should be paying me. We're making you money. Flat rate never costs you. Flat rate always pays you. So implementing, well, guess what? I'm not going to tell you how to do that because it's a long section of presentation. What I am going to tell you is that Profit Rhino, powered by Callahan Roach, has a combined group of contractors alone within this organization that have put together over 100 years of experience. Myself, I've been working with flat rate, Callahan Roach products, and now Profit Rhino since 1992. If you do not understand how to utilize flat rate, or you do not understand how to calculate what you need to charge in your service department rather than in your replacement department, then definitely get in touch with us about some of our training programs that we offer. We offer an online learning session, and we also offer in-person boot camps here in the Dallas-Fort Worth area. I want to summarize it this way about making a change in your company. I know flat rate can be a big leap. It was for me. But Edwards Demings made this comment. He said, it's not necessary to change. He was talking to Ford Motor Company when they were having problems in the 80s with qualities. And Edwards Deming was the gentleman who brought the phrase quality is job one to Ford and made them a quality organization. He said, it's not necessary to change, but also your survival is not mandatory. And he told the Ford executives, you need to evolve or die. And obviously Ford evolved because it still makes a vehicle today. So I encourage you to evolve your businesses if you're not using flat rate. So I'm going to go ahead at this point and turn it back to you, Jeff, and let you conclude with any questions.
Outstanding. Jeremy, again, thank you so much. A lot of really great information there. I want to thank everybody for attending, spending 45 minutes to an hour with us. I know your time is valuable, so I definitely want to thank you all for attending. I want to thank Service Fusion for allowing us to do this. What you guys are going to see on your screen, if you have any questions that you didn't want to put in the chat, call our number, send us an email, check out our website. Lots of different ways that you can contact us, even if it's just a small question about flat rate or even something industry specific. While this topic is on flat rate, we do a whole series of webinars that Jeremy's put together. We have a whole series of LMS courses that really get into a lot of things that have to do with pricing jobs and running your business and the things that maybe we all have some questions about, but we don't really know where to find that information. So these are amazing resources. I do want to get to a couple of questions that did come up on the webinar, and then we'll go ahead and wrap up. So Jeremy, the first question that came across, and this is one that I hear a lot, but I do want to throw it past you, is, my company has less than 10 trucks, and my understanding was that flat rate is something that only larger companies were really able to do. Maybe you could speak a little bit about how that isn't the case, and maybe some suggestions on if I'm a smaller company of 5 trucks or less or 10 trucks or less, what should my first step be on getting into flat rate?
Wow, that's a deep question, because really your size of your company has nothing to do with flat rate. The flat rate's just a method to present a price. That's all it is. It's not a big amount of office work. It's not based on the text you have. It's simply the way you present the price. And you know what I found in my experience, even one truck operators already flat rate things. You go out, you've done enough condenser motors, or you've done enough electrical panels or whatever, that you know what the price is because it's so common. So a lot of times you'll just go, oh, well, that's going to be $400 or that's going to be $900, and you don't break it down. All I'm encouraging you to do is do everything that way, at least 99% of it. So it's really not based in any way, shape, or form on the size of the business. Now, the steps are simple. Find out what it costs to run your business so that you know what you need to charge and you charge correctly. That can be dependent on your business size as to what calculations you use. If you're not familiar with that, you can turn to folks like us who can give you some guidance. But once you know what you need to charge, starting flat rate is as simple as getting a product and having a little meeting with your technicians, which we can provide you steps all the way through the whole process. And I used to be, I would mail out letters to customers and tell them to expect a new way of paying for things. And we stopped doing that in my second company because we just didn't have any complaints. The customer would say, well, can you break this down? And we'd say, I don't know how to break it down. We don't have an hourly rate. We use a national pricing guide now. So it's simple for anyone to put in regardless of size.
Awesome. You kind of answered the next question that came through, which was, hey, the hourly rate, if you're using a flat rate program such as Profit Rhino, Callahan Roach, the hourly rate needs to come from my company. Some tips and tricks that you have for helping to figure out that hourly rate? Would it be just to get with a company like ours, or find another company that can help you get there? Again, I think you kind of pointed to it, but I'll kind of let you clarify there because I think that's a really important piece.
Well, you know what, you could look it up on the internet. I mean, there's a lot of internet stuff, but you remember what Abraham Lincoln said about, the internet. And I know that's true because I read that on the internet. You've got to be careful who you get your education from. Who's to say the contractor next to you is doing it right? He may look like he's doing it right, and he may be, but perhaps the best way is to find professionals that deal with business that can help you do that. I've been doing business training now for 20 years, and I'm ashamed to admit it, but my first service company that I ran, I lost a lot of money at because I didn't understand that at a certain size, you have to calculate what to charge in a service department different than you do when you're a one-man operator or one man and another guy, and you both do installation and service. When you start diversifying into different departments, you have to understand how to allocate overhead and departmentalize. And if you do that, you can hit those numbers you want. And that's why I mentioned classes. We do classes. A lot of your manufacturers and distributors offer business classes. But my advice to you is get a business education. We all come into this business from trucks. Or we're SOBs, son of the bosses, right? That's the way we come into this business. But rarely do we come with a business degree. And that's where our industry suffers. So just take the time to educate yourself in a professional setting. And I think the payoff will be phenomenal.
For sure. And again, just to reiterate, that's the number one question that we get as companies are making the change to flat rate, or they're looking into this is, boy, how do I figure out what my hourly rate is? And as Jeremy just said, reach out to us. The one nice thing about the team here, and again, at any of these email addresses, websites, phone numbers, is we're all pretty versed in how to help you get to that number so we can put the right information into your flat rate. Because as Jeremy alluded to, if we don't have good information that goes in there, we're not going to be successful.
Yeah, Jeff, just one final comment on that. I sold flat rate for Callahan Roach for a few years when I first started. And the number one question that every contractor asked me was, what should I be charging? 100%. And my answer was, darned if I know. What does it cost you to run your business? So until you know that, you're never going to know if you're charging correctly.
Outstanding. Really great stuff. Jeremy, again, thank you for taking an hour to spend with us. I want to thank everybody for attending and spending that hour. Again, a reminder, we will get a copy of this webinar out. So if you want to rewatch it, or if there's somebody in your company that you want to sit down and look at this with, we definitely encourage that. Thanks again, everybody. Have a great rest of the day.